Then you go with Taylor Motter over Brendan Donovan. This is the one that I think people were talking about the most, and you're trying to find a way to gain an edge there. Hobie Milner was the relief pitcher that was brought in by the Brewers. They were going to go left on left against Brendan Donovan, and this was good from Jeff Jones, who writes for the Belleville News-Democrat, and he was there in Milwaukee. And he tweeted this out, and I can assume this came directly from Oli Marmol in the postgame because, of course, this is something that Oli was asked about because Brendan Donovan's your leadoff hitter. He's been pretty trusted. Righty or lefty, it hasn't really mattered this year. You can recall the day the Tyler O'Neill play happened that occurred on a hit that Brendan Donovan got as a pinch hitter when the other side brought in a lefty to face him. So he's come through against lefties recently in clutch situations, but they didn't want him to have the opportunity this time. They wanted to go with the splits a little bit. And part of the reason Jeff Jones tweets out, Milner, 53% on the ground, left on left, which means if he's got a left on left matchup, the data tells you he's probably going to produce a ground ball. That's his style. That's what they bring him in to do. The Cardinals project with a hitter like Donovan, not even a hitter like Donovan, with Donovan specifically against the pitcher Milner. In that spot, the Cardinals project, and this is still from Jeff Jones's tweet, 64% on the ground. And Jeff adds this part, and I'm glad he did because I didn't really say it at the time, but I was thinking it on Twitter. He said, and he'd already taken 4 pretty bad at-bats today. I mentioned at the top of this podcast that I thought the Cardinals this was like the first day that it stood out that I thought a handful of guys were taking bad at-bats. And Brendan Donovan was one of them. His at-bats did not look good today. To my eyes, it just, was one of those days I thought for the Cardinals offense where you can tell when guys are right on it and things just aren't happening for them. And then there are other times where they're not as competitive as you wanted to be. Only one strikeout for Donovan on an 0-for-4 day. And I don't, to my, immediate recollection, recall what the other types of outs were, but he just, not a lot of hard contact. And I just didn't feel, he had a ground out in the first inning. I guess I could go through it. It just wasn't your typical Brendan Donovan day. Another ground out later on in the 4th or 5th inning, scrolling down further, Donovan. So it was, 3 ground outs. The third one goes back to the pitcher, and then a strikeout. So really weak contact from Donovan all day. You talk about the pitcher that can induce a ground ball. Brendan Donovan's going to hit a ground ball. The Cardinals need damage in that spot. They're down 6-1. The decision was to go with Taylor Motter there, and he obviously can be a direct replacement at second base for Brendan Donovan in the field. But that took a lot of people by surprise. Like Donovan, has been a pretty regular standard player for them all year. Again, had recently come through against lefties. Motter, on the other hand, has had maybe a handful of at-bats all year, hasn't really played. He's more of the 26th man, the last guy on the bench. But because he plays second base and hits right-handed, they're going to bring him in for that spot for Donovan against a lefty. That was sort of the thought process for the Cardinals. And so for the Cardinals to make that decision to take the bat out of Donovan's hands, without the context of how he had looked during the game, I thought maybe that's not a move you make, because if he's looking good and he's right on pitches, I don't think the Cardinals are worried about left on left with Donovan. I've said that a lot of times on the podcast recently. And so I think that's what Cardinals fans saw in that moment. But if you were watching his at-bats, like Donovan he didn't look like himself today. I don't know. You're a professional baseball player. You have to play 160 games a year. Sometimes you're not going to look at your best. I think Oli Marmol, first of all, identified that with Donovan and said, we also don't want, the ground ball result that we're probably going to get in this particular matchup. That's an example of the data that the Cardinals have that we don't have at our fingertips. And maybe that's out there somewhere if you're able to look that up. But I think that's kind of internally, they're looking at that and saying 64% ground ball likelihood here. We don't like that because we're looking to get a line drive somewhere probably, or you want to at least hit in the air and hope that you can find a hole in the outfield and drive in a couple of runs to get back in this game. Best case scenario might end up being a home run. But Taylor Motter is not really the guy that you expect, that you expect to get you that home run, right? So for me in that moment, I was thinking Dylan Carlson would be the guy that I would put in if I were going to go somewhere else. But I also didn't mind taking Donovan out. So that's why I don't think I even tweeted about it in the moment. A lot of people were going, Taylor Motter, what is this? What's going on? And I thought, let's see this play out. I'm going to be honest about it after the fact that I wasn't second guessing the decision to take Donovan out. But I was kind of thinking, maybe this would be a chance for Dylan Carlson against a lefty. That's his strong suit. Last year, he struggled against righties. But from the right side against a lefty, Dylan Carlson was really good last season. And if you look at some of his numbers this year, Dylan Carlson's actually, like, the hard hit rate and all those things, pretty good. He's actually gotten some rave reviews from StatCast in the early going this season. Evidently, the Cardinals did not think that was a spot to deploy Dylan Carlson. Jeff Jones does mention that they had Carlson on deck then to bat for Burleson, had the inning extended beyond the moderate bat. But the Cardinals, with 2 outs, did not want to use Yepez or Carlson in that spot when it was 6-1 with the bases loaded and you're down by 5, because you're burning 2 players at once, basically. If you go Yepez or Carlson there in the leadoff spot, you end up, that guy's not going to be able to field at second base, so you're bringing in Motter regardless. So you're burning 2 spots for one play, essentially, 1 pitch hit opportunity. You're using 2 players because somebody's going to have to come in and play the field. But and this didn't occur to me. I was really thinking along the lines of Dylan Carlson, and it makes sense why they didn't go Carlson necessarily, because if he's on deck, if their plan is, hey, extend the inning, like even a grand slam right here from Taylor Motter, where Cardinals are still losing 6-5 at that point. So they need something after that to continue if they're going to win this game. That would be a great spot for Carlson, who would then get to face a lefty if the guy that's pinch hitting for Donovan can extend the inning. So at that point, you don't want left on left with Burleson against Milner. And so if you think through it that way, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. If they were going to pinch hit Carlson for the lefty Burleson in that spot, I'm cool with not going Carlson in the leadoff spot, although you also could have reversed it if you really wanted and thought that Taylor Motter was worth, giving an at-bat to in that spot. I would go, okay, what's the most aggressive play? It would be Carlson, who I consider to be the better offensive option. I'm going to bat him first, and then I'm going to go Taylor Motter if the inning is extended. And in that case, you get, the same 2 guys are going to bat, but what I consider to be the better hitter in Dylan Carlson gets to bat first, and you use the same amount of players as you would have. But in a situation where the leadoff man, which ended up being Motter, makes an out, then you only use 1 player, which is fine. But in the 8th inning, if you make that out, which Motter did, now the Cardinals trail going into the bottom of the 8th, 6-1. It really doesn't matter how many players you use, right? Like, Carlson's going to end the day on the bench, I guess. So is Juan Yet. Like, it doesn't matter, because you're down by 5 and you're not going to mount a 5-run rally in the 9th. It's just very unlikely to happen. So who cares how many players you use is my point. Like, they didn't want to burn 2 players, and that's fine. I think if you walk through it that way, the upside was there to go ahead and what's your best shot? What's your most aggressive shot that you can take? I think it's Dylan Carlson before Taylor Motter. Another way you could go even more aggressive would be, and this was something that Jeff Jones in his tweet said he asked Oli, would be Juan Yepez. Because you're talking about needing damage and wanting power. I say, YOLO, you're down 6-1, use the entire bench. Because the worst case scenario in that spot is it works, and now you have to figure out how to field the rest of the game in a competitive game. But at least it's a competitive game. If you don't figure out a way to score 5 runs, or at least 4 runs to give yourself a crack at it in the 9th, it doesn't really matter how many players you did or did not burn. You've lost the baseball game. So that's my mindset. I'm saying go as aggressive as you can, which at first I thought would be Dylan Carlson, but now that I'm kind of thinking about it, another route you could have gone would have been Yepez or Carlson, and then the other one immediately after that, if it works, in the Burleson spot. If you think Yepez is the better offensive option, go with Yepez, and then go Carlson after that. Never bat Taylor Motter, but he does come into field. He plays second base. Yepez or Carlson, which would be Carlson, would stay in the game and play the outfield in the Burleson spot, and then you've used everybody. I would have considered going that way, because again, it's a 6-1 game. It doesn't really matter if it doesn't work. If you don't get the hit, you could burn anybody or not burn anybody. You've lost 6-1. Or maybe, Goldschmidt hits a home run that's meaningless, or Arenado in the 9th. You've lost 6-2. In that spot, I think the aggression, it would have been warranted. I'm a little curious. And again, from the tweet from Jeff, who I appreciate his kind of insight here, he says, perhaps he's talking to the average tweeter. He says, perhaps you individually would have rather used Yepez in the Motter spot. He said the Cardinals would not. That much was made clear. I asked specifically, and it was a hard no. So interesting to hear that Oli did not consider Yepez at all in that spot. For me, it's as a Cardinal fan, you've got an at-bat that's important. Who you want taking it. Don't worry about the other details. You want Dylan Carlson? Do you want Juan Yepez? Do you want Taylor Motter? I think people would probably be generally pretty split, especially if you told them, okay, it's a left-handed pitcher. People are going to be pretty split between Yepez and Carlson, if I had to imagine. I don't think one answer is correct over another. Yepez, maybe his at-bats have not been quite as crispy as the ones Dylan has been taking this week and a half or so. Obviously, Yepez just got there from the Nootbaar IL deal. But for me, I would probably lean Dylan Carlson. But if you said Yepez, I couldn't fault you there. I don't know that it's Motter, though. And if it's playing a factor of how many players you burn in a 6-1 game, I think maybe that's a mistake because it doesn't matter. You're just trying to win the game. Go as aggressively as you can. And if in the 12th inning you wish you had an extra bench guy, at least you're playing in the 12th inning. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the way I saw that.